Hello everyone, welcome back to SQL with Neel. In this chapter, we are going to learn one of the most important parts of the SQL, and which is performing calculations, aggregating data. Whenever we work with the real business data, we usually don't just want to see raw rows. So we want to answer like what is the average sales amount, then what is the highest lowest value, what is the total sales, how many records are there in our data set, how can we calculate a running total, how do we find percentage contribution of a department, and etc. So we will learn all these important topics in this video. So let's move to the first data set. So we will use the sales data set. So in the sales data set, we have sales ID, salesperson, department, region, sales amount, and commission. So this is the data set we are going to use, and I have the code to generate this table. So we will first execute this code to create a table. So we have completed this query. Now we will insert all these records to input our data in this table. So let me just execute here. Okay, perfect. And let's see how we have in this table. So if I execute this query, select asterisk from the sales, it will return all the output. So we have here the tables same as I had in the data set. So here we have sales ID, salesperson, department, region, sales amount, and commission. And so let's move to the first problem, calculate the average value. So uh, you want to calculate the average sales amount for all the sales record and for each department. So here we need to write two queries. First, for all the sales record and for each department. So we want to calculate the average sales amount for all 10 rows, and then we will create another query where we will create the average sales amount per the department. So we have electronic furniture, clothing. So we have these three departments. So we will create the average sales amount as well for each department. So let's first create for all the sales records. So here this query will returns the average sales amount for all the rows. So here you can see we have selected the average of sales amount. So average is a function like built-in SQL function to returns the average values. And we have renamed this column as average sales. So let's execute this query and see result. So here you can see that we got the result. Then so means that the average sales amount for all the sales record is 23,000. And now we want to calculate per department for each department. So we will use the same that part, select the average sales amount from the sales, but here we will add one more thing. So we will mention the department. So we need to have the department column as well in our output to generate the average sales amount per department. And we will use a clause, the group by clause, to returns the average sales amount for each department. So we will use group by department. So we use a group by for only categorical columns. So the department is category. Now let's execute this query and see the results. So you can see here we have the department clothing, electronics, and furniture. And then the average sales is 14,000. Then we have for each and every department. So, and you can also sort this table by descending or ascending. So it will depend. So now let's move to the second problem. Let's say that you want to find the highest and the lowest value for all the records and for each department. So you need to have again two queries. So in the first query, we will return highest and lowest sales across the table. And in the second query, we will write for each department. So let's complete our first query here. So we will select mean of sales amount as the lowest sales. So mean is a built-in function to returns the lowest value of the column, while the max returns the highest value of that particular column. And we will select the sales table. So let's execute and let's see the results. So the lowest one is 12,000 and the highest sales is 35,000 for the sales column. Now, let's say that I want lowest sales and highest sales for each department. So you know that we have the three departments, and for each department, we want to have the results for the lowest sales and for the highest sales. So you know, we just need to add a group by department to returns the lowest and the highest values for that particular department, and we will add department column as well in order to get the results. So let's execute this query and let's see the results. So you can see that we have all the departments, three departments, and for each department we have the lowest sales and the highest sales. So this is very simple but efficient as well. So let's move to the next problem. Calculate the sum of the values. So this is very popular and common function for every company. We use that. So in every problem, we mostly use sum. So calculate the total sales amount for all the sales records and for each department. Again, we will use two queries and we will use built-in function called sum to return the total sales across the table. So let's execute here. So you can see that we got the total sales for the whole table for the sales amount. Now let's say you want the total amount for each department. So we have used the group by clause and we have added the department column here, then sum of the sales amount, and we have renamed the column name called total sales from the table group by departments. Let's execute and you can see that we have the total sales for each department. Now this is very important. Whenever you need to calculate the total sales or total amount, you will use sum, that is built-in function. Another very important topic, which is count rows and values. So let's suppose that you want to count the total number of sales, how many sales we have, and the number of sales in each department. Again, we will calculate the total sales across the table, then total sales for particular department. So let's move with the first query. So select then the count of the sales ID as total sales records. So here I have renamed this column, but here we have used the count, which is a built-in function from the table sales. So let's execute and check the results. So here we can see that we have 10 numbers of records across the table. Now let's say that I want to check per department how many records we have. So how many records we have for clothing, how many records for the electronics. So let's do that. We have added the department column in the previous query, and we have added one more clause called group by to get the number of records for each department. You can see here for clothing, we have three numbers of sales. For electronics, we have four numbers of sales. And for the furniture, we have three numbers of sales. So if you just sum, you will get 10. So this is the distribution across the table. Now calculate the total, running total. So you will add the sum, like the sales value from previous to the current one. So we will keep going adding till we have the last one. Okay, so let's understand the problem first. So calculate the running total of the sales amount. So let's do that. So this is a slightly advanced level query, but it's very useful for the running totals. So in the finance, we usually use this running total topic, and it's very useful. So we will select the salesperson. So that will returns the name of the salesperson, the sales amount for that particular person, and we will use the very important thing here, the sum of sales amount that will count the total sales for particular records over, and we will say the order by sales amount and the sales ID as the running total from the sales order by the sales amount. So let's execute and then I can explain you in better way here. So you can see that I have this salesperson, okay? So I have this column and I have the sales amount as well for each person. Now, what a running total will do? So running total for the first record, it will give as it is because we don't have the previous person before the Michael, and that is 12,000. For Sophia, she is the second person, and it, her sales amount is 14,000. So what running total will do? Running total will just add the previous amount to the current one. So the running total will add $12,000 to the current amount, which is a 14,000. So if you do 14,000 plus 12,000, you will get 26,000. So it will keep adding, adding, adding till the last records. So this is called the running total. And what is important in this query? First of all, here understand sum of the sales amount or the order by the sales amount. So it will first sort our table by the sales amount. So from the lowest amount to the highest amount, and by the sales ID as well. Then after it's sales ID. And then as the running total, we have just rename it. And we have from the sales and order by the sales amount. What if I remove the over and sales? Let's execute and let me show you the difference between that. It shows that it's invalid. So we need, if we need aggregation, the list should be not there. So that's the reason we have added that line. So or the order by sales amount. Okay, so let's move to the next problem called calculate the percent of the total. So let's suppose that you want to determine what percent of the total sales come from the electronics table department. So you can also say that what percentage of total sales come from the clothing. So you can ask that. You can solve that as well using the same query. So let's solve this query. So first of all, we will select. Then we have here, we have user case. Why we have user case? Because we need to first select only the sales, the total sales from the electronics. So how we calculate the percentage? So we calculate the percentage. Let me show you. So we use equal in the Excel, then we will use the sum of particular total or column, particular column, okay, and then we will divide by the total of the column. So this column will be, let's say, equal to electronics. So this sales the sum of the column where the column is equal to electronics, and we will divide by the total of that particular column. And for getting the percentage, we will multiply by 100. Then we will get the percentage for that. So let's understand in this query. So first of all, what we have done here, we have selected the sum, then sum of the case when the department equal electronics, then the sales amount, and then end. Otherwise, so we have not mentioned else. That is the optional. If you need to do that, you can do that as well. You can also say else 0, but here we don't require because we will mention only what we need for calculating the sum. So case when department is electronics, then sales amount, just end it. So it will give sum of total sales for particular electronics. Divide by the sum of the sales amount means the total sale, which is, you can see here, this is that our total sales, $230,000. That is our total sales. For electronics, we will calculate that. So let's calculate here, execute. So here you can see the percentage of total is 52.61%. I have rounded just for 2 decimals. So let's say that you want to know more in depth. for this query. So what I can do, I will remove this as it is, and I will remove the bracket as well. And let's run this one and see. So here you can see that the total sales for the electronics, it's 121,000. So let's here 121,000. Okay. And for the total sale, let me calculate here. Okay. So this will be the total sale. Let's execute. So it's a 230,000. So what our function will do, so we'll divide by 23 and 230,000, and we will multiply by 100. So particularly, this is the expression you will get. So if I run here, I got 52.61%. So here is the basic fundamental of that query, and it's very easy to understand that. Okay, so let's move to the next aggregation function. And so aggregate nullable columns. So in most of the data set, you will get the null values. You will have the null values and you have to handle those null values. So here we have the problem. Calculate the average commission for each department while treating the null commission as row. So if I show you the table, let's go here. So we have here the commission table. So in that commission table, we can see that we have few nulls value, okay? And we want to handle that. So let's again, so you have to replace the null values with zeros. So instead of null, you have to put 0. So let's select the department. Then we will calculate the average. As mentioned, we want to calculate the average commission for each department. So the average of call say, this is the inbuilt function call say. So where we will mention two arguments. Call say, in the call say, we will first mention the column name and comma 0. So it's the same function as we use in Excel called if null. So if null, then we will mention the column name comma 0. But in the SQL, we will mention call as. So call as is an inbuilt function for the SQL to replace the null values with any mentioned values. So if you mention here 1, it will replace with 1. So and then we have rename as average commission, then from sales and group by department. So let's execute this query and let's see. So this is the average commissions they are getting per department. Okay. So let's say that if I don't mention call is function, what will happen? Will that handle our query or not? So let me remove this one and let's see. So if I execute this, so you can see here we have 600, then we have 1600, then here we have 1125. So what's the difference? So let's first copy this one. Okay, so we want to compare both of the results and we want to see what is the case here. So if I execute both one, so the first one is by replacing null value with 0. So it's indicated and it has taken as a 0 as a column. But in the second one, it omitted the null rows. So in the second output, we don't have any records who has a null commission. Okay, so it's very important to handle the null values in correct way. So if you want to avoid null, you don't need to use coalesce, but if you need to mention or replace your null values with any specific values like we have here 0, then you need to mention 0 to get the correct results. So this is the end of our chapter, and this is very useful for the aggregation if you are currently working with any company who is using SQL or preparing for interview. This is very, very important and you must work on it. And I hope this video will help you to build your strength on the SQL. And thank you so much for watching the video. See you in the next video. Thank you.